here is my my life cycle. I broke it down into 3 basic steps. And if you attended this session last week, this should be a refresher. You should you should see basically the same thing that we discussed last week. The 3 basic steps for my life cycle of an image is, obviously, after I take the image, you have to manage it. You have to get it formatted in some sort of a file structure. You have to each image has to have some sort of a file naming convention. Once you have that kind of managed, and you have a good idea of, let's say you take 1,000 pictures, it's unrealistic that all 1,000 pictures you took will be worked on, that they're all winners. If they are, that's awesome. You need to have a process to sift through. You want to purge the images that are not good. You want to rate images that you want to work on. You want to have a system in place that when you go to step 2, which is image processing, you know what you want to attack. You're not kind of fumbling through. And that's where step 2 is. Once you have an idea of, all right, out of the 1,000 images, I've isolated 40 that are good. And that's a great ratio in my book. If I can find 40 solid images, I'm happy. And then there's a series of processing that I would go through for when I process. There's an order, there's a logic to that. And then finally, step 3 is image backup. So to break it down, again, with image management, what I mean by that is having some sort of a logical folder structure, making sure that your file name makes sense to you. Converting, for me, I shoot in RAW and I convert to DNG, which is Adobe's digital negative file format. There are a few benefits there, and we'll go over that in a minute. And then finally, what I call a 2-pass sweep and stack. I use Adobe Lightroom to manage my images, but this works for Apple's Aperture as well, if you're an Aperture user. And we'll go through that. My image processing workflow is pretty straightforward. If I have an image that needs color correction or profiling, I will correct it, and I use a color checker passport by X-Rite. That's what I use to get my correct color. After that, especially if I'm doing an HDR image, I'll do noise reduction and your typical spot removal. So if my lens or my camera had dust on it or spots, I'll address that. Nothing really terribly surprising here. But then there's stylization. And stylization is basically what the foundation of my webinars are around. It's about kind of getting a certain look to your images. After that, I'll texturize, because a lot of times when I stylize, I lose some of that texture. So I'll return the texture, and then finally, when I'm ready to output, I'll sharpen. And that's usually the very last thing that I'll do. And sharpening for output means if the image is going to be posted on my blog, it'll get sharpened. If it's going to get printed, it'll get sharpened. You want to resharpen your image to compensate for some of that loss of detail that you get when you post it on the web or when you print. When you print, you lose some of that sharpness, so you want to compensate for that. And then finally, image backup. I can't stress how critical image backup is in my workflow. I have both solutions for on-site incremental backups, meaning backups to hard drives that stay with me here in my home office. I work out of my home. I have a whole area dedicated to my little onOne East Coast office. I also have a solution for an off-site backup. If all the snow that we got over the past few weeks melted and flooded my room where my office is and destroyed my technology, I know that I have a copy of everything I've ever done outside of this, outside of my house. And also for those of you who may not have high volumes of photos, you can always look into cloud-based solutions. And what I mean by cloud-based solutions are solutions that exist on the internet. Like Gmail, for instance, that's a cloud-based solution. Dropbox is a cloud-based solution. There are these servers out on the internet that you copy or you sync your files to. And those are totally viable if you don't have a crazy amount of images. So with that, let me close out of here and we'll start. I'm just going to illustrate. Basically, this webinar is giving me an opportunity to illustrate to all of you what I do when I work with my images, how I get them imported, what I do afterwards, and how they get backed up. And obviously you can see that I am a Mac user, but pretty much everything that I do, there is some sort of, either there's the product is already existing on Windows or there's a Windows equivalent. So again, like I said, I use Lightroom, and these are images that I took. I'll just go to grid view. Just turn this window and turn the grid view. So I went dog sledding over this past weekend, and I just imported these images this morning, so I haven't even had a chance to go through and rate. But it's a good opportunity for me to show you, and I can make the thumbnails a little bit larger. What I would do first, so when I come into from a shoot, the first thing that we all have to do is import our images, right? So you can see I've got a Drobo. Drobo is a company that makes these proprietary RAID systems, meaning I have a system. If I go into the Drobo dashboard, I can illustrate to you what this does. So I've got this Drobo drive that has 5 hard drive slots, and right now I have 4 drives occupied. Each has 1.5 terabyte hard drives in them. This gives me a total of about 4 terabytes of hard drive space. I've got 2 terabytes filled with photos, and I've got a little under 2 terabytes left, which is not a problem because I can always add a 5th hard drive. So on my Drobo, back to kind of having a logical folder structure, what I was talking about, I have a root library. It's called, very simply, Master Photo Library. And you can see that I have all of my images broken down by year. And I started digital photography in 1996. These are actually scans of images that I took on film. So I apologize. This is not digital photography. This is just regular photography that I scanned. But I didn't have really any system. I just broke things down by year. Nothing really special here. Around 2000, when I started getting into digital photography, and the frequency of my photos taken was increasing because it didn't cost me any more money to develop film. I started breaking down images by day and by session. Now, this is still very much just kind of random. I was still at university, and I didn't have an idea of what a system required. So let's flash forward to, say, 2007. I still have the same system here, just month, day, and then the event. Around 2008, I started kind of creating more of a logical folder structure, where I started breaking down the year and then into 12 months. And so you can see under January, I've got month, day, and then the event. And we followed this through 2009, 2010, and now 2011. Every time I do a shoot, it gets its own folder. When you go into the month and you go into the actual folder, you can see all of my files. And this is what I mean by a logical file name convention. The way I work in Lightroom is when I import an image, I tell Lightroom to automatically take the original file name. So here's my original file name that the Canon camera issued, IMG_1951, and I tell it to put the year, the month, and the day in front of it. So this way I know that these images are unique to this shoot, and obviously each image has its own unique file name. So it gives me what I need. This is just for a file name. This has nothing to do with EXIF information or that kind of deal. There's a question here that what do I do with random photos that aren't necessarily part of a shoot? It doesn't matter. Even if it's just one photo or 5 photos, it gets its own folder. Think about it. What kind of tax do you get, or what penalty, or it's not like it takes up a lot of hard drive space to create a new folder. It's just discipline. So I like to organize everything into its own folder. So even if I took just 5 images in the day, it would get its own folder, and that's just the way it would be. Here's a question: why do I leave the IMG in the name? It just kind of, the way that Lightroom works is that the syntax is calling for the original file name. Here, let me, there's a question here as to if I can enlarge this, and I can. Give me 1 second. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in a little bit so you can see. Here's my master photo library, the years. Under the year are the months, and under the months are the actual events. The question as to whether, why do I or where do I convert to DNG? That's part of Adobe Lightroom's import engine. So let me zoom out here, and let's go into Lightroom. So if I go to File, Import, you can see that there's an option up here called Copy as DNG. I select that, and I do always save in DNG. That's the reason why I saved in DNG. A DNG it's the same exact file as a RAW file. It's totally uncompressed. The only difference is let's say, so here, just to illustrate to you, where is that image that I worked on this morning? Okay, so this is an original file. This is straight out of camera, and I worked on it, and I made these edits. If I didn't convert to DNG and I wanted to send you this RAW file with these edits, I would have to send you the RAW file plus a secondary file. It's called a sidecar file, without getting too technical. In order for you to see these changes, I would have to send you both files, and that's a pain. What a DNG allows me to do is it kind of wraps both of those files into one file. So all I do is give you the DNG file, and you've got the changes, and you have the same benefits of the uncompressed RAW file. Alright, I see here that the cursor is not clear. I can fix that, actually. Let me just, I'll increase the size of my cursor to make it a little bit easier for all of you. Universal access and cursor. Where's my cursor? Keyboard, mouse, and trackpad. Cursor size. Alright, let's make that a big cursor. Alright. I hope this is better. Alright, so what we have here is an image that I've worked on, and we've gone over right now the folder structure, and we've gone over the file name. What I want to do, and DNG is commonly recognized. There's a question of whether DNG is commonly recognized. Absolutely, it's Adobe's format. The reason why I use DNG is because Adobe has pledged never to change the DNG format. So in 20 years down the line, I don't have to worry about finding some sort of a converter or some sort of a reader that can support, say, a CR2 or a NEF file. If 10 years down the line, Canon or Nikon abandon their RAW formats for something else, which can happen, it's unlikely, but I don't want to have to scramble to find some sort of product that can support them. DNG supports it. And you can, the easiest way to convert DNG, John, is if you're in Lightroom, you can select a file or an image, and just under library you can see convert photo to DNG if you haven't done it already. So you can go here, if these weren't already DNGs, I can select them, go to library, and convert to DNG. And yes, DNG, another benefit of DNG is that it is slightly smaller in file size than a RAW, but it still has all of the same benefits of RAW. Do a Google search, do a basic Google search, and for DNG versus RAW. Either one is fine. My recommendation is to shoot one or the other. When you shoot in your camera, you're shooting in RAW. Whether you keep it as RAW, as a CR2 file or a NEF file, that's up to you. Or if you convert to DNG, it's up to you. But shoot RAW. I mean, I very rarely will shoot JPEG, just because it doesn't fit the style of photography that I shoot. I don't need high action photography. And you can see here, this was pretty high action, and I did just fine with my 5D Mark II, shooting, the fast speeds of these dogs. So when I get images in, the first thing that I'll do is, you remember in my slide, it was called the two pass sweep and stack. So sweep and stack is basically the first thing that I would do through here is I just quickly I'd start browsing through, and I would find images that I clearly do not want. I want to delete them. And if there's an image that I want to delete, I can hit X, and that sets the image as rejected. So if we go to the grid view, you can see right here, let me zoom in, there's a black X. That means that that photo is marked as rejected, and Lightroom has a nice command that can delete all rejected images at once. It's the command to delete all rejected images in Lightroom is Command Delete on a Mac or Control Backspace on a PC. I see some questions coming through that I want to address. How do you batch convert to DNG in Photoshop? That I'm not sure of. You might have to use Bridge for that. I don't use Photoshop to manage, or Bridge to manage my images, so you'll want to look into that. I know in Lightroom you can do that. And I do not. There's a question of whether I keep an original copy of my CR2, my RAW file. No. When the files import into Lightroom. So here, if I'm going to put my original compact flash card into my reader right now. So these are the images that I've already imported into my Lightroom library. I can go into Lightroom here, File, Import Photos. And so on the left here is my card. And you can see actually that all of these images, Lightroom detects whether the images have been imported already or not. So it doesn't let me re-import. The reason why you see some new ones are because these are some that I've already deleted. But you can see the option up here, copy as DNG. So what it's going to do is it's going to bring over the RAW file, convert it to a DNG, and get rid of the RAW file. It won't delete it off the card. I don't delete anything off of any card until I have a confirmed backup. And I'll go over that in a bit. But you can see here that here's kind of how Lightroom works. You've got a file name sequence. So this is what I was saying. When my image gets imported, it renames the file. It uses the date with the 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, dash file name. So that's how, and you can use all these different attributes to change your file name. It can go as customized as you want it to be. Next, it applies my metadata. So I have metadata here that basically has my copyright information. So if I open up my 2011 metadata, it puts my email address, my phone number, not my phone number, my website rather, and then my copyright information. So you can see that the copyright year, what the status of the copyright is, and what the rights are. And that's nice because it automatically embeds that into the IPTC, the IPTC of the image. So if I ever give you a copy of the image, it'll be embedded in there already, that information, which is nice. So what I would do here is I would start going through and I would start rating images. And you can see that I've got over here on the left this quick collection. And I have it broken down basically. If the image has it, I have a little kind of parentheses here, 1.8, which is basically the keyboard shortcut. So let's say this image over here. Let's say I want to work on this image in the future. I will say 1.8. And what it does is, you can see it gives it a 1 star with a green color swatch. And if I go into the folder, these are all non-HDR images that are straight out of camera still. I haven't touched them. I haven't processed them. They're just kind of images that I find interesting. They're not HDR, but I want to do something with them so that when they're ready, I can post them on my blog, say. And so that's what I do. I'll go through and I'll do, the first thing I'll do, the first sweep is deleting images. So I'll go through and I'll hit X to reject images. The second sweep will be to actually mark images that I want to work on. When I have images that I've worked on, I'll change the rating from 1.8 to 1.9, which is 1 star blue. So these are images that are non-HDR that are ready for me to post on my blog. I can take any one of these images. If I'm, I put a new image on my blog every day. And when I finish working on an image here, I change the rating. And it gets removed from this folder and gets put into this folder. And it's done on the fly. It's very cool. Here's a great question, Stephen. Stephen asks this. I want to cover this as well. Whether I use separate catalogs, Lightroom catalogs. The way that Lightroom works is you break your images down into catalogs. So if you think about it, a catalog is like a database. And yes, I absolutely do. You can see here in my Finder, I have a folder called Lightroom Catalogs, and I have catalogs, again, from 96 to 2007. I just bunched everything into one catalog. In 2008, I started creating catalogs per year. In 2009, I noticed as I started shooting HDR, I started shooting HDR around 2007. And especially into 2008, obviously HDR requires you to shoot higher volumes of images. You're not shooting one image, you're shooting 5, 7, 9 images of the same scene. Like any database, when you put too many records into a single database, you bog it down. Any database. So what I figured out, the best solution is to create quarterly Lightroom catalogs. And that's what I did for 2009 and 2010, and same thing for 2011. We're still in the first quarter, but mark my words, on April 1st, there will be a second quarter catalog. I find that it improves. Now, the next question, there's a question of how big of a catalog can you make in Lightroom 3 before it starts to slow down. I don't know if there's a specific, like number of records before it slows down. There is in Lightroom. If you go into catalog settings, I want to say that there's an optimized catalog option. It's somewhere here. Maybe it's under preferences. But there is an ability, there's a function that says optimize catalog. I can't find it right now. Maybe if we go to help and we type optimize, yeah, there it is, optimize catalog. Oh, it's just under file optimize catalog. So that will kind of, I don't know how well it works, but I know that I was starting to see some significant performance hits in 2008, and I read an article that suggested breaking the catalogs down into quarters, and ever since then it's been great. Now the question that almost always gets asked right afterwards is, all right, well, if you take a bunch of images, how do you remember where the image is? Like, let's say I took an image last year. There's no good answer there. For me, it's never an issue. I kind of have an idea generally which quarter of the year is an image that I took. So typically, it might take an extra minute or two for me to open up a different catalog, but for me, it's not a problem. But there is no good reason. And some people here I'm seeing are saying that optimizing in Lightroom 3 has helped them with their speeds. So that's cool. By all means, do it. I just I prefer using multiple catalogs. There's someone here that says that Julianne Kost, who is the Adobe evangelist, or their product evangelist, states that Lightroom 3 handles one catalog better than multiple. That's cool. Again, whatever works best for you is exactly what you should use. For me, I prefer the quarterly catalogs. It makes me feel a little bit better. It makes it easier for me to manage my images, because I don't want to have a library catalog of thousands and thousands of images. If we go into Lightroom here and I open up 2010 Q4, it just closes Lightroom. It opens it up. It took maybe less than 10 seconds, but in Q4 I took just under 5,000 images, and if we go to Q3, these images build up, and for me, I much rather would prefer breaking them up. In Q3 I shot 6,585 images, so these add up. These are a lot of images, and it's not anything. It's just the way that I found it works best for me. Let me just resize Lightroom. Let me put everything onto the same screen. Okay, so let me go back to the original catalog here, the 2011 Q1. When I go through I have the same process for HDR images. So where was I last for HDR? It's been a while since I shot anything really HDR. I think if I so basically, let's say I have an image that is an HDR. I've clearly got brackets here, and this is where stacking comes in. I've got 9 brackets. And this was taken in Boston. What I'll do is I'll go through, and I haven't done it yet for this folder, but I'll select my 9 brackets and I'll group them together. So you can group images. Basically, it's taking a collection of images and putting them under one stack, and you can expand the stack just by clicking on these little double arrows. To group images, just select multiple images. Go to Photo, Stacking, and then Group into Stack. I know that Aperture has a grouping as well. And so what I'll do is I'll take these images here and I'll send them to Photomatics. You can see I've got a ton of different export presets. Each one of these works. I have my own custom Photomatics preset that will automatically send images in for tone mapping. And I do this with all of my images. Now, when I have an image that's tone mapped, so for instance, this here, I took these brackets, oops, and then I tone map them. Now this is just an HDR image. No editing has been done yet. This would have gotten 2 stars. So you can see here, a 2-star image, or 2-star image means that the image has been tone mapped, and I've got 5 of them ready to work on. These are just tone mapped. Nothing has been stylized yet. This just tells me that I have to work on these images. So these are images that eventually will make my blog. I just haven't had a chance to work on them. When my images are done, when they're ready, now this image is totally skewed because of the resolution of my screen, but this is an image that at any time if I need an HDR image to put on my blog, I have it ready to go. When an image is posted on the blog, it gets 4 stars with a yellow color. This means that this image is already on the blog. I can't use it again. So these are images that have appeared, that have been posted at one time or another. And I try to keep this very, very straight. You can see I've got the same thing for non-HDR images published. So these are all images that have made it to the blog that are not HDR, because I'm trying to kind of keep track of how many HDR images I'm shooting and how many non-HDR in 2011. That's kind of a personal goal of mine, is to see if I'm still keeping with that. And so, like, for instance, this was today's shot on the blog. But I know that these shots cannot be used again. And it's good. It makes it easier for me. If you're the type of person that puts a new image on your blog every day, I didn't do this last year. If you go to my catalog last year, I didn't change the rating to show when I published an image. And I'd have a huge folder of images ready to, with 3 stars, meaning the HDRs are ready. And I would have to go back and look through my blog and see, did I post this or not? So in an effort to kind of fix that, I went further into my rating. So I recommend everyone going through and really rating images. It helps. It really does help. There are a few questions about what tone mapping is and what my Photomatics workflow is. I recommend going to we have an archive of, I don't know how many HDR webinars I've done already, but if you go to our onOne Software University, you can watch all of those webinars, or if you go to our podcast channel, you could download the webinars, and I go into detail of how I use Photomatics to create HDR images. And there's a suggestion here to use the keyword HDR. I don't keyword. Keywording is the ability to attribute words associated to an image. If you're a stock photographer, you're probably a master at keywording because that's like one of your most important assets. But I don't do that. I did that today. The reason why a helpful way to keyword is if you use Flickr, say. So if we go to that image that I worked on, I'm just scrolling down for a second. There it is. You can see that I added a bunch of keywords here. I posted this image to Flickr this morning. I don't use Flickr very much, but Flickr supports keywords. and if you put them in Lightroom, it will sync up. But it's helpful. You can definitely, if you put keywords in here, you can search by keywords. I personally don't. I just use a rating system, and I know what I need to know about these images. That's just my own personal way of kind of sorting through my workflow. But that's my point here. So in this day, I took 425 images. I'm not going to work on all of these. I didn't have a chance to really go through everything, and you can see not everything's a winner. Like, we've got this image here. I don't know if I like it. This image here is okay. This image here is better. This image here would have been great, but the fence goes through the dog's eye, so it gets deleted. This here, the nose is in focus, but the eyes are not. And so you go through and you kind of start, this is boring, there's nothing here. This is exactly my workflow. I don't know why I shot this, but it gives you a kind of a window into, at least how I shoot. If I see something that's interesting, I'm going to shoot it. I don't care. I don't think about it too much in the field because I can come here and delete it after the fact. And I'd rather have more shots than less. So I just go through and see, all right, here, this is something I might want to look at. This is a non-HDR, so I'll give it a 1.8. And I know now that I'll look at that. And I have, different options. So that's kind of how how I work with, this is still management. We haven't even gotten to processing yet. If you're a high volume shooter, you really have to manage it in a system that works best for you. There's no way around it. So let's just say now that I want to work on an image, and let's just go to an HDR image, a 2-star image to process. So I could take an image like this one right here, and I'll send it into Photoshop. I use Photoshop to work on my images. A lot of people use Lightroom. But for me, I personally like editing in Photoshop. I feel that the tools are more powerful. And yeah, the question mark, when I say 1.8, those are keyboard shortcuts. 1 will give a 1-star rating, and 8 will give a color of green. So that's kind of, you can see if I go to any of these images here. Let's say this image. 1, you'll notice over here I'll hit 1, it gives it 1 star. 8 will set to green. This folder, if I go to the folder here and I go to Edit Smart Collection, the folder has a rule. The rule for this folder is the rating has to be 1 star, the label color has to be green. And that's how I work with all of these images. I know that 1-star green means it's a non-HDR image ready to process. And there's a question of at what point do I address high ISO noise. I do that right now. Actually, I don't want to reject that. Like for instance here, in HDR, a lot of times you get noise in your skies. And if, I'm not sure, whoa. It's not too bad here. There's a little bit of chromatic aberration that I'm going to have to deal with. You can see, you see this blue line. This is something that has to be addressed. And if you don't address it, that's pretty much the signature of a bad HDR. So I look for all this stuff. But you can see noise. So at this point, what I would do is I would use a quick select brush. Let me bring my toolbar here. I have a quick select brush, and I would quickly, let me make a smaller brush here. I'll just kind of select the windows here. And I use Topaz for my noise reduction. So let it not be said, even though I work for onOne, that I don't use other products. I have NYX products. I have a bunch of products. And right now the reason why I use denoise is because they're one of the only ones out there that are 64-bit. I prefer using NoiseWare Pro by Imagenomic. Those guys seem to think that they don't have to release 64-bit products for Photoshop, and it's killing me because I find them to be some of the best in the noise reduction field. I hope that they're supposed to release a beta, but I don't know if they have. But I would love to work with them to get their product back in Photoshop. So I would run NoiseWare to reduce or denoise to get rid of the noise. That's typically when I will do it. I'll also go through and Let me just move this off to the side. Like, I would try different things. Like these two bars over here really bother me. Why is my Wacom not working? I have a Wacom tablet. Let me just pull the cable. All right. So what I would try to do here is I would try different things in terms of trying to clone this out. You know, I would see what works, and this isn't clearly working. That kind of, I could try to bring the trees down, but I don't like those two bars. So those won't appear in the final image. I will definitely get rid of those, but I don't want to spend too much time on the post-processing. I would also look around for dust spots, if there are any spots around here. Like I can see that there's a spot right here. If I, let me go to my zoom tool. There's a spot right over here. It's kind of faint, but I would get rid of that. And I'm always looking around for this. To me, that is that's unacceptable to have dust spots in your image if you can avoid them. Another thing that I'll do is I'll look for any weird, strange things sticking in my frame. Like over here, I've got this, you can see on the right here, there's this weird thing. I don't know what it is, but I would kind of just address it, get rid of it. I would make sure that the color was smooth. Right now that's not very good, but that's what I look for. And you can say it's obsessive compulsive, but it's important to me to have kind of all this stuff fixed. I would fix that, like I said, that chromatic aberration, which is very common with HDR images. So for now, I know that Define is 64-bit, or it's 64-bit. That's why I use it. But the one that I want to use, Imagenomics Noiseware Pro, is not. That's only 32-bit, which would require me to restart Photoshop in 32-bit, which is unacceptable to me. So I would go here, and then obviously the most important part is I would, after I do my noise reduction and my dust spot removal, is I would start stylizing, and I use obviously my products. I use Photo Tools, Focal Point. I mean, anything to get the image looking the way I want. Stylizing would be a totally different webinar. We have plenty of those webinars already on our archive, so I welcome you to check those out. Let me see if there are any quick questions. Do I use any content-aware fill for dust spots? No. You know, content-aware fill is a new feature that came with CS5, and I find it to be extremely finicky. You know, you have to apply it, undo, apply again, and every time you get a different result, and it's almost like a slot machine. You just don't know when you're going to hit the jackpot. So I'll try it every now and then, but I don't use it too often. I love my healing brush, and I use the spot healing brush, which kind of lets you just draw, and it'll sample the pixels around it, which is really nice. But yeah, I mean, if we go, let's go here. Let's try. Let's just see if we deselect. And let's take a really quick selection of this area here. It's actually not a good selection. Let me do a larger selection. Because I enlarged my cursor, the precision's kind of off. And so I can Shift-Delete, go to Content Aware, and hit OK. And let's see what happens. I mean, that's not... the covered bridge goes into the forest. So I see what it's trying to do, but it doesn't work for me. I could probably finagle it. I could probably massage it and get rid of it, but I haven't found a lot of luck with it. So that's just kind of how. And using content-aware fill for spots is overkill, in my opinion. There's a question as to what type of tablet do I use? I use two Wacom tablets. I have an Intuos 4 large and an Intuos 4 medium. My medium is my travel tablet. Whenever I go to trade shows or I go over to Portland to the onOne office, that goes with me so that I can process on the plane or I can process in the office. The large always stays at home with me. It's pretty massive and I absolutely love it, and I can't recommend it enough. Now, Jack, you say you've been using Imagenomics for noise reduction for 64-bit. I assume you're a PC user, because they, in all of their infinite wisdom, Imagenomics decided to segregate their client base by the operating system. So they made 64-bit products for Windows, but not for Mac, and that's a cardinal sin. You really want to avoid ostracizing your client base based on what computer they use. So for now, as of a couple weeks ago, they still weren't 64-bit. So until that comes, I can't use them, even though I paid for a license, which is a bummer. So that's just the way it is. All right, let me move on here. So that was the post-processing. There's not much there that's a secret. Those are the products I use. Before we go, I want to do the step 3, which is, like I said, critical, the backups. This is totally subjective, how you back things up. Let me just move this out of there. Okay, so like I said, I've got this durable volume. That's my production volume. I see some questions on what kind of computer I use. This is a Mac Pro. It's a dual quad-core processor with 16 gigs of RAM, and you saw the hard drive space. So it's a beefy computer. Apple has a built-in backup system called Time Machine, where it'll back up your entire system to an external hard drive. This volume here called Lebowski is my backup. That's my Time Machine volume. Next, these are my on-site solutions. I've got two. So I've got right now on my computer, I've got 4 external hard drives, or technically 5 external hard drives. These 2 are internal. For my on-site backup, so in the event that my Drobo for whatever reason dies, every single night I've got a present folder which has 2010 and 2011 images backed up. The past is everything prior to that. It has from 96 to 2009, plus some other various files. I also back up my Lightroom catalogs as well for those respective years. So every single night I use a product called ChronoSync. So ChronoSync is a Mac-based application, and it does a wonderful job of creating incremental backups. So every night you can see here, where's my ChronoSync icon? Right there. Next scheduled event. So at 1 o'clock in the morning, I have a routine to back up all of my past folders. And what it's going to do is it's going to look at all the folders, and it's going to see if any of the files have changed in file size or attribute. And if it does, it'll sync that file. It's not going to back up the whole thing over and over. It's just going to look to see if anything's changed. Now I can tell you that nothing has changed in that I haven't touched anything from those folders, so that backup should be quick. But then I think at 3 in the morning, my present container will launch, and that will take longer because that is looking at my existing, my current folders. So for instance, I imported those dog sledding images this morning. It'll start backing those up to my present volume. That's all well and good, except what happens if anything, God forbid the house blows up, someone robs the place, a flood, a fire, earthquake. I don't know if we get earthquakes or significant ones in Massachusetts, but that's neither here nor there. What if everything that can go wrong goes wrong, and Murphy's Law rears its ugly head? Well, I bought this RAID drive. It's by G-Tech. It's called a G-RAID drive. It's a 4 terabyte RAID container. Nothing special. Just 2 terabyte hard drives connected together to make one big fat 4 terabyte drive. And this has every single image I've ever taken in my entire life. Now, here's the trick. My wife does not work in the house with me. She works in an office in Boston. So every 2 weeks, she brings this volume home for me. So she brought the volume home yesterday. I back it up today. She takes it home to the office tomorrow, and she keeps it in her office for 2 weeks. So in the event that anything happens to my computer and all the volumes, I've at the worst lost 2 weeks worth of images, which I will gladly trade in for my entire life's worth of images. I mean, I wouldn't know what to do. Without being overly dramatic, I wouldn't know what to do if I lost my images. It would be a catastrophe. So I cannot recommend enough the ability to have an off-site backup and an on-site backup. I haven't had any issues. Knock on wood, now that someone asked and I said that I haven't had any issues, my hard drives are going to crash. But no, I have not had any issues with my hard drives. Most of these hard drives have anywhere between 3 and 5 year warranties, and they're really good about swapping them out. So I'm not worried. My Drobo died 3 months after I bought it. I have a Drobo S, and Drobo was great. They got me a new one the next day. The power of Twitter when you complain on Twitter. So, these are things that you have to kind of audit for yourselves. What do you need? Like, to me, this is very important. I have a lot of images, and before I took on my role at onOne, this was what I was doing. And I have a whole separate section for my commercial images. These are just pretty much my personal images. I have a whole separate system for the commercial stuff that I did, but it's pretty much the same. So there's a question of what type of hard drives to use in my Drobo. They're just 4 1.5 terabyte Seagate hard drives. You can get hard drives on sale all the time, so always keep an eye out. And even if you just buy them to have if you have a little bit of surplus cash and you just buy them to have them sitting around, it won't hurt you because you'll have a swap on the fly. There's a question here as to whether I use the Intuos versus the Cintiq tablet. So Wacom has a Cintiq tablet, which is literally a display. It's a monitor that you can draw directly on. We use them at the trade shows. When we were at Imaging USA, I used the big one. The problem is it's something like almost $3,000 for the big one. The smaller one is too small for me. I have two 30-inch displays, so I'm not going to drop down to a smaller display just so I can draw directly on. My Intuos does a perfect job, and I'd rather have two massive displays than one smaller one. Rudy's asking, what drives do I recommend for backup in terms of reliability and durability? I wish I can say that there was, they have, it comes down to Western Digital and Seagate, and both have their successes and their failures. I would not buy a green hard drive, even though I try to be very eco-friendly. Green hard drives do not have the spin rate. I always buy at least a 7200 RPM hard drive so that it spins at that speed as opposed to a 5400 or a 5900 RPM hard drive. And I'll never buy anything smaller than 1.5 terabytes. Seagate now has 3 terabyte hard drives, which I'm going to start investing in as well. And there's a question as to, is there a reason why I don't back up a copy of my images as I'm importing into Lightroom? No reason other than I have a system that works with ChronoSync. I like the ChronoSync system of backing up my images. I don't use Lightroom to back it. Like, if you go into Lightroom and you go into catalog settings, there's an option right here, backup catalog. Every catalog is set to never because my ChronoSync backup takes care of that for me. It'll take care of my photo folder and my Lightroom catalog folder, so it's like a redundant. You don't need to do it twice. So I'm just looking through the questions right now. Hitachi has good hard drives too, Frank. I just personally have. I will always look for the company that gives me the longest warranty. It used to be everyone gave 5 years, and then they started kind of dropping it down to 3-year warranties. So if there's still companies that have a 5-year, even if it's a little bit of a premium, I'd rather have, in 5 years, I want to say, hey, my hard drive died, give me a new one right now, which they've done. So I want to look through here. Do I back up to CD and DVD? Nope, absolutely not. I can't stand optical drives. I don't trust them. I don't trust discs. They fail all the time, or the drive dies. I've never had a good DVD-ROM drive that has lasted. Plus, a DVD-ROM drive, a single-layer DVD holds 4.6 gigabytes. That's nothing for me. If it works for you, great. But you can buy a 1 or 2 terabyte hard drive for $100, and that'll last you so much longer than DVDs. And as long as you take care of that drive, you don't jostle it, you keep it in a relatively normal temperature, that drive should last. But nothing is guaranteed. A hard drive can die. If you really want, more assurance, you can get a solid-state hard drive, which is basically like your compact flash or your SD cards that you put in your camera, except it's massive. It's also very expensive right now. Right now, they're still somewhat of a commodity or a precious commodity. In about a year or two from now, they'll probably drop in price significantly. They'll also increase in space. Right now, I think they're about 256 gigabytes, which is okay, but not really. I do use Time Machine, Jill. Time Machine is right here. That's my Time Machine volume. So every hour, Apple backs up certain folders that I have specified. Oh, here's a good question by Ellie about my color space that I use. Very good question as to what color space do I use. I use ProPhoto RGB. So when you go to, where is it? Right here. So when I work with images in between Lightroom and Photoshop, I use ProPhoto RGB. When I export my images for blog, the color space gets converted to sRGB because that's the most compatible for web, and that's kind of what I use. Jerry has a question as to whether Carbonite's a good internet backup solution. Yeah, I mean, Carbonite is there. Mozy was good. I don't recommend Mozy anymore. They recently changed their terms of service or how they work, and it's garbage. So I don't recommend Mozy. The problem with all these, it depends on how many images you have locally. If you have a large volume of images, it will take forever for that initial backup to the cloud. So unfortunately, right now, I don't. It's not viable for me. But if you have, a smaller volume of images, definitely check them out. I don't use USB 3.0. USB 3 is the latest protocol for the USB standard. Right now, most everything out there is USB 2. USB 3 has a significantly faster data transfer between the device and your computer. I just don't use that yet. My Drobo is connected to my Mac using eSATA, so I'm getting very geeky, but eSATA is one of the fastest connections you can have right now. If I would not use a Drobo for my production volume if it was FireWire 800 or USB. It just wouldn't be fast enough for me. eSATA, I've had zero problems. The color space I use for press is sRGB, William. That's kind of what I do. Why TIFFs over PSDs? Jerry, I couldn't give you a good answer for that. I just stuck with TIFFs. And you know what? I actually think I will switch over to PSDs. I was looking into it, and I think TIFFs are a bit more bloated in file size. When I send, so let's say if I go here and let's go to some brackets. Let's go to an HDR image. So let's say I take these images right here and I send them to Photomatix to convert to an HDR. You can see my output format is TIFF. So that's kind of why I started working with TIFFs. And that's the only reason why when I go to my preferences and I work with Photoshop, I kept it as TIFF, but I can just change it to Photoshop. And I'll play around with it. I think I got shied away because when you select PSD, Lightroom gives you this little warning that says it can be less efficient than TIFF with respect to metadata updates. So no good reason there. I might give it a whirl and see what happens, but that's totally a good question. There's a question of whether you should save JPEGs as PNG files. I save PNG files when I need to maintain transparencies. So if I'm posting a logo or something on my website and I have transparency, a JPEG doesn't support transparency, but PNG does. So I hope that answers your question. Someone's asking what kind of monitors do I use. They're both Dell 30-inch displays. My primary is a Dell 3011, and my secondary is a Dell 3007. Susan is asking whether the conversion from ProPhoto to sRGB out of Lightroom is better than Photoshop. I haven't tested the two, so I don't want to comment on that. If I haven't tested, one thing I will never do with you guys is give you false information that I'm not 100% sure of. So I don't know. There's a question of whether I've tried HDR Effects Pro by Nick. Yeah, absolutely. I've got it installed on my computer. I'm friends with the guys at Nick. They're awesome. And it's a cool product, but for me, Photomatics works better for me right now. Great question, Brian, in terms of what do I recommend for color correcting a monitor. You can see right here, my little monkey. I use a Color Monkey by X-Rite. In fact, let me open up my calendar for a second, just so I can show you what I mean. Let me turn these off so I can just give you an idea. So here's, whoa, that is massive. Where is, all right. You can see every quarter, I told you, so let's go to April 1st. April 1st, recalibrate LCDs. So that means every quarter I take my Color Monkey and I profile my displays. I cannot recommend this enough. This is such a great point, Brian. I'm really remiss with myself that I didn't bring this up. You should absolutely 100% invest in any type of color calibration utility, hardware. Whether you're an X-Rite person or you want to use Spider, one of my best friends is a product manager at X-Rite, and so I'm kind of loyal to X-Rite. They have a bunch of great products. You basically put this device against your display, and it flashes certain color swatches, and it calibrates your display. When you get a display from a vendor, Dell, Apple, it always needs calibration. You will be amazed at the difference. It's not necessarily better or worse, but it's just different. And I know for myself, when I work on an image that is going to be sent off for printing, I want to control exactly how it looks, and I can only do that if I have an even playing field, meaning I have calibrated my image. And then the other point I want to make is you can see every quarter I remind myself, create quarterly Lightroom catalog. So I don't just preach it, I definitely practice it. So I don't trust Max. There's a question by Yasmin as to Max built-in calibration. I don't trust it. Yeah, I use custom ICC profiles. Jerry asks if I use custom ICC profiles. I will. If I send an image to be printed, say with on Canvas, I use Artistic Photo Canvas for everything. I will see what their custom ICC profile looks like, or what the image looks like with it, and I'll process accordingly. Richard, I absolutely calibrate my laptop. I calibrate my laptop. I calibrate the display my laptop's connected to, and I calibrate my two 30-inch displays on my workstation. So that's kind of what I do with that. Does Lightroom accept layered files? Yeah, if you have a PSD file with layers, or a TIFF file with layers, you can bring them. Like these images here have, let me see if I open this. So this is a TIFF file. This is a final image. Let me open it up. Show in Finder. Let me open this with Photoshop and see if it retained the layers. Yeah. So you can see here. And you can see I have Photo Tools, and I've used Color Effects Pro by Nick. And so what Lightroom will do is it'll just show you the top layer, the final image. But you can absolutely maintain layers in Photoshop using a TIFF or PSD, which is the Photoshop file. Gina's asking about the onOne. So X-Rite has three primary calibrators. They've got the Huey Pro, which is kind of your entry level. You've got the onOne Display 2. I have that as well. I have all of X-Rite's products, and the onOne is awesome also. But for me, the Color Monkey is just the best. It just rocks. It's kind of pricey, but yeah. So do I have a second video card in order to calibrate my? No, my video card has two video outputs, so I can connect two displays to it, and I just calibrate them together. I'm trying to see here. Actually, I feel badly. We've exceeded our time. This is why I love this particular webinar, because the questions are always fantastic. They're all about cameras and technology. So I definitely enjoy it, and I hope you guys are enjoying this too. Um, there was a question here. Da, 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 da. Oh, in relation to bracketing, Steven sees that I have 9 exposures. That's because I use a device called a promote control. So if I bring this here and we go to promotesystems.com, I've got this device here called a promote control, which allows me to it basically allows me to bracket as many brackets as I want. I can do 100 brackets if I wanted. It's a fantastic product. I recommend it if you're very much into HDR, because Canon cameras limit you to 3 auto exposure brackets on all of their models except for their 1D series, which is they start at $5,000 and go up to $8,000. I'm not spending that kind of money on a camera just so I can bracket. So the promote control is $300. I would recommend buying it directly from B&H or Adorama. You'll get it faster. Bill, if you can specify you can elaborate any question of whether I can use that with Hasselblad Digital. Oh, the promote control? I doubt it. I did a recent project with Mamiya. They gave me one of their RZ cameras with a digital back, one of their 33 megapixel digital backs to do HDR with, and you couldn't use any of that stuff. It was basically, I used a handheld meter to get my mid-range exposure, and then I had an iPhone application that calculated my brackets for me. It was pretty funky. So that's how I did my bracketing with, and I would dial it in with the Mamiya using the actual shutter speeds. So that's kind of how I bracketed there. And yeah, Tim, they are right now. The promote only works with Canon and Nikon, and I do believe you're right. They are working on a Sony compatibility, which would be good, because Sony's really making a good play in the DSLR arena. So with that, let me see if there's a question here. I think there's a question asking about explaining the 4.6, 4.7 categories. So right here in Lightroom, I've got these 2 categories: 4.6, which is non-HDR published, and 4.7, which is HDR published. And all that means is 4.7 means it's 4 stars, and 7 will give it a green rating. This means that these images have been put on my blog, and they're HDR. 4.6 is the same thing, except they're non-HDR. They're just single exposure images. Maybe they're infrared. The reason why is it helps me know exactly what I've used and what I haven't used yet. So that's kind of how I work with it. Ted, what color profile question do you have? I don't see your question here. Can you retype it if you don't mind, in terms of what you're asking about color profile? The bracketing website, Jerry, I assume you're talking about Promote Systems. It's right here. Oh, I closed it. Here. It's just promotesystems.com. We'll give you this device here, Promote Control. But again, B&H and Adorama have it as well. How can we see my blog, Peter? It's just my name. It's just brianmatiash.com. And so there's today's image. And I just have new images every day. So as I put an image on the blog, I go to Lightroom and I mark it as published. So I know that, like this image here, I know I can't use this because I do a new image every day, and 365 days in a year, that's a lot of images that you want to keep track of. I don't want to accidentally post the same image twice. That to me it's cheating. So I don't want to do that. Okay, here we go. How do you deal with color rendering differently in the Lightroom Develop module than with the lab renders? So The way that I can be most sure that an image is going to print the way I expect it to is, there was a question earlier about using a custom ICC profile. If you go to most any print website, there should be a page where they give you the opportunity to download their ICC printer profile. You can download that, and basically and load it, and it'll basically adjust your display to show you what the print should look like, and you can process accordingly. So if I print with Artistic Photo Canvas, I can get their ICC profile and use it if I choose to. And that's a pretty surefire way to make sure that your image will you'll get the print consistent to what you expected on your screen. Can you embed a color profile from your lab in a DNG file? Well, you can create custom profiles over here under the Develop module in Lightroom. There's a camera calibration section, and you can create different profiles. So you can embed them, absolutely. Do I have an old camera body converted for infrared, Nick? Yes, I do. I had a 40D, a Canon 40D that I converted to infrared. I used digital silver imaging to convert it. I can't recommend them enough. They're great guys. They're here local in Massachusetts. And you basically mail your camera out to them, and like 2 weeks later you get the camera, and it has an infrared filter over the sensor. And it's a permanent process, so you basically want to make sure that you can see here infrared camera conversions. And so I did this DSLR, and I did this 665 nanometer option, because that retains some color. You can see here, this is the 665 nanometer filter that I used. So I hope that helps. Let me see here. Can you please show how you actually publish a photo to the blog site? Sure. I mean, there's nothing to it. I know that my blog supports a maximum of 900 pixels per image. So let's go to an image that's ready. So I've got this HDR image here. Let's go to File, and then Export. Let me bring my export module. Now you can see here I've got this, it's a weird file name, but it's blog 1s24h. That's my daily series export. And what it'll do is it'll automatically rename my image. So it's 2011 February, and then tomorrow, if this was tomorrow's image, I would put a 9 because tomorrow's the 9th. It would convert to JPEG sRGB color space at an 85% quality, and it'll resize my long edge to 900 pixels. It'll make it a resolution of 120 pixels per inch, and like I said, it'll sharpen for screen. You can change it to different options, but I sharpen for screen and then send it out. I don't watermark. I don't feel the need to watermark. There's a question of whether I register my images with the Copyright Office, with the government. No. As a photographer, you have inherent copyright as long as you can prove that you took the image. So I've got the raw images here. I have inherent copyright. I'm not really worried about that. If anyone used an image against an agreement that we have, I can submit a cease and desist or a retraction order. I'm not worried about. So, and that's happened, and it's a bummer, but these things happen. Do I sharpen twice? No, I sharpen once. I only sharpen on output. I'll retexturize. That's a little bit different, but I will not sharpen twice. I don't know, Ellie, what the copyright laws in Canada are, so if they are different, that's kind of the problem. And Jim, no, actually, I didn't lose any rights to damages without registering with the Copyright Office. I definitely, it was an arduous process, but I walked away happy. And what I mean by retexturizing is, all right. So really quickly, let's find an HDR image to process. Right here, this is a good one. So right now, the pavement here has kind of lost some sharpness, or some texture rather. I should be careful with what I use. In Lightroom, I built this brush, this adjustment brush here. Where is it? Right here. And I called it HDR Texture Boost by me. And the reason why I did that is because I put this brush on my website, on the blog. You can download it for free. And what it is basically, as I draw on it, it brings back some texture and some contrast. And so I'll do this on any surface that has texture. So feel free to go on the website. I'll show you where to get it. It's over here, brianmatiash.com. And then under additional resources, if my site ever wants to load, HDR best practices guide, and then the bottom one is the Lightroom texture brush. And I put some instructions on what you need to do to get it in there. So you download the brush with this link right here, and you just pop it in there. So hopefully, by all means, have fun with it. Or you can recreate your own, or modify the one that I gave you. But it does a nice job of bringing back some of that texture. And then I will send it out for sharpening. What else do we have here? I feel badly that I'm keeping everyone extra, but we still have how many people? We have several hundred people still here. Awesome, guys. You guys rock. Can you elaborate on steps to add a lab custom profile? Sure. Let's just see here. Let's go to Blurb. Blurb is a company that makes photo books. So what you can do is, now I'm just kind of looking through. I'm not familiar with their website, but I want to color management. So under the help, under color management, there should be an ability to download their profile. So you can see here, installing the Blurb color profiles. So they give you here, download ICC color profile. By downloading this, it gives you the ability to soft proof your images. And there was a question of whether I soft proof. And I do sometimes. It depends. If it's for a client, absolutely, I'll always soft proof. If it's for myself, usually I know enough of. I've worked enough with artistic photo canvas where I know what I need to do with my image to get it in a consistent look. And I have a bunch of canvases hanging over here, and I'm so happy with each one of them. So that's kind of what I mean by custom ICC profiles or custom color profiles. Most websites will have something like this. And if not, you should email them and ask them, can you please give me your custom profile for your printer? It's not a profile for a display. It's profiling for their printer. You're sending images to them. They have a printer. Their printers are calibrated a certain way. These profiles help you see what the calibration is, and make sure that it gives you peace of mind to know exactly what your image will look like. There's a question as to why I use Chrome as opposed to Safari. I just like Chrome. I like how it syncs with Google, and I use almost all of Google's apps, and I use a bunch of things up here, my little widgets. So I love all these things. Safari's cool, but I prefer Chrome. Let's see. What other questions do we have, or are we? And yeah, I sharpen on output. Correct, Pama. Can you go over Lightroom preferences exporting in Photoshop? I mean, the preferences for exporting are totally up to you. Lightroom has these export preferences over here that you can customize everything. Each one of these does a different thing. So if I'm sharing, sometimes I'll share critique images with friends using Dropbox. So it'll put a copy of the image on a Dropbox folder that I created for them. Or sometimes every now and then I'll put free iPad wallpapers on my website. I'll take some of my HDR images and I'll just put them on the website for people to download if they want new iPad wallpapers. And so I have an export preset that formats my JPEG, or formats the HDR image to resolution optimized for iPads. So and you can see it. Everything here is very customized. I have just more export presets than I really need, but they are there when I need them. So that's kind of how presets work. You specify where you want the image to go, what the file name is, what the attributes of the file are, the size, whether you want to sharpen, and whether you want to apply a watermark. And then in terms of just working with Photoshop, There's nothing really that I do. I just convert to TIFF, or rather, I just send it as a TIFF. Um, how do I build an export preset? That's pretty easy. You just kind of we'll create an export, and um, you go through here, you set all these settings, and when you're done, you hit Add right over here in the bottom, and you give it a name, and that'll create the preset. So I can go here, I could just right click, go under export, and I'll have my presets. I could just export it as I need to. So how do you duplicate all of the presets when you create a new catalog? That's Ray, that's the beauty of Lightroom, is the presets are in a folder that every catalog looks at. You don't have to recreate them. Anytime you create a new catalog, all of your presets will be there right away. So it's really nice. I use 120 pixels per inch for the web, Yasmin. That's just kind of what I use as best. If you back up your Lightroom images and catalog, does it include the export presets? Nope. That is covered with Time Machine. So Time Machine backs up my on the Mac. All of your Lightroom presets are stored under your home drive. So under your home drive, if you go to Library, Application Support, Adobe, Lightroom, that's linguistics, Lightroom. Here are all of Lightroom settings. So here are my export presets under user presets. Here are all of them. And Time Machine is backing up this entire folder. So I have it's on a separate volume, but I'm not really worried about that. I have no problem losing all of those export presets. Those will take me 5 minutes to recreate. The collections do not stay with the catalog, Jake. You recreate those. So in 2010, I didn't have those catalog or the collections where I differentiated between published images and non-published images. In 2011, I recreated, but really, so you do it 4 times a year. You do it per quarter or per year if you're only doing it once, and it doesn't take very long. It takes just maybe 2 minutes. So you want to put these things into perspective. There's a question by Sylvia as to what the advantages of using Lightroom are. It's just a great photo manager. I know more people now that don't even leave Lightroom to edit their photos. Lightroom has become extremely powerful for photo editing as well, where you don't even need to go to Photoshop. I still go to Photoshop because I prefer it, but Lightroom does such a wonderful job. And if you're a Mac user, try Aperture as well. I don't use Bridge. To me, Bridge I don't understand why Adobe keeps it. But, and no offense to anyone who uses Bridge, but it's just it's totally redundant. Lightroom is just fantastic. Are there any good alternatives to Lightroom for the PC, Adam? Try Photo Mechanic. I don't know if Photo Mechanic is a PC product. It might be. Let's see. It might be. It's kind of a Lightroom manager. Purchase. I can't tell if it's downloads. I'll find it. For Mac, for Windows. Yeah, okay. So Photo Mechanic's kind of a library manager, I believe. I just don't use it. I know that Zach Arias uses it. A few other people use it. So, check it out. It might work. And I see a few people here who are already saying that Photo Mechanic is for the PC and it's good. But I like Lightroom. How does onOne work with Lightroom? Molly, very good question. Bringing it back to the company. I appreciate that. The check is in the mail. You can access the Lightroom products within Lightroom and Aperture. If you go to File, Plug in Extras, you've got the products over here. So I can bring my image right into Photo Tools or Photo Tune or Photo Frame, yada, yada, yada. The only one that you have to bring into Photoshop first is Mask Pro. But you can access all of these. 4 out of the 6 existing plugins are also standalone, meaning you don't even need Photoshop to launch them. So what I mean by that is, let's say I want this image to go into Focal Point, which is the standalone products are Focal Point, Perfect Resize, Photo Frame, and Photo Tune. The only two that need to go into Photoshop are Photo Tools and Mask Pro. So if I go into focal point, you'll see this pop up over here. And this is kind of our little Lightroom export. And you can see under the edit with option, you can either do the standalone or edit through Photoshop. Standalone is nice because it will save you if you don't have a lot of if you don't have a lot of RAM or your computer's not very powerful. When you have Photoshop launched, it takes a decent amount of system resources. Like, let's see how much Photoshop. Photoshop's taking almost a gigabyte of memory, and Lightroom's taking a bunch too. But by doing standalone, you don't have to have Photoshop launched. You can launch it right into focal point. So these products are available right within Lightroom and Aperture. So that's a kind of how my little thing with our products. And you're more than welcome. You guys are being very kind about the extra time. I have this is what I love to do, and it's my job. So I appreciate that everyone's having such a great time. I'm just trying to see if there are any. Peter makes Peter's saying that both onOne and Nick do have infrared emulators. We have effects that emulate it. Yeah, but I pay to permanently alter my camera. I did that for several reasons. One, my 40D was sitting on my shelf collecting dust, and that's just the way I bought a 5D Mark II, and my poor 40D just kind of got relegated. I never really needed it. It's a cropped sensor, and it's not as powerful as my 5D Mark II. And after a couple of years, I didn't want to sell it because it is a powerhouse. The 40D is a beautiful camera, and I was trying to kind of break into a different type of photography. I was getting kind of not disenchanted, but I wanted to try something different. And my friend turned me on to infrared, and I figured, why not? It's better. I'd rather spend a couple $100 and put new life into a camera than watch it sit collecting dust. So that's kind of why I did it. William brings a point that you can put infrared filters on the front of your lens. You don't need to send your camera and permanently alter it. Here's the major disadvantage to that. As soon as you put an infrared filter on the front of your lens, you will not see anything through that lens. You would have to first compose your image with the filter off, compose it, focus it, meter it, and then put the filter on. With having a filter over the sensor, every lens you put on, you can see through it. And if you use live view on your camera, you'll get a live infrared preview, which is awesome. Let me tell you something. There are few cooler things than turning live view on when you're standing in the middle of a forest or in the middle of a snow-covered field and seeing all of that in infrared color. It's amazing. And so that's kind of what I do. And I have all kinds of images here. Nothing very good, but these are all infrareds. I haven't edited any of these yet. But, this is in Boston Common. So it's awesome. I was standing here and, seeing these images, as opposed to seeing the normal kind of color, you're seeing them as infrared. It's awesome. And so you can see just how many crappy shots a photographer takes before they get one that's good. You just kind of fumbling through. And this is what I mean by I got my infrared camera. I'm just fumbling through. I'm not still there yet with seeing what works best with infrared. So I'm getting better at it. It's just, to me, this is why I converted it. I actually kind of like this shot. That's kind of cool. I have to come back to this. So that's 1.7. See? Now I rated it, and now I know that I can go back and work on it. So, Once you have edited your photos in Lightroom, you export them to your external hard drive. When I edit my photos, the whole entire library gets backed up to a hard drive. I don't re-export them. And I see John just sent his 350D for conversion. You'll love it, John. It's fantastic. It's so much fun infrared. If you have a camera that's not getting used, you're not going to get nearly the resale value. You're going to take a huge loss. And if the money is more critical, definitely sell it. But for the $250 or so, I'd rather, like I said, breathe new life into a camera and open my eyes to a whole different type of photography. Another nice thing about converting your camera as opposed to using an infrared filter, your filter is pretty much one size unless you get a drop-in filter. So if you have a 77mm filter, a millimeter thread filter rather, you have to buy step-up or step-down rings to put them on different lenses. Here, by converting your camera, as soon as you put a lens on your camera, it works. It's infrared. That's it. It's done. So, and Joel, yeah, Lightroom absolutely works with Windows. So, that's without a doubt. Not Lightroom works with Windows. Aperture is only Mac though. So that's Apple's product. So David's asking if I can give a quick explanation of how Drobo system is better than stacking external drives. Well, Drobo uses their own proprietary RAID system. It's I can't remember what it is. It's like a RAID 5+0 type of thing, I think. I can't remember. It's a weird proprietary system. But basically, if we go back to the Drobo dashboard, if any one of these hard drives dies at any time, I can pop it out on the fly. I don't need to do anything. I can pull it out and put a new one in, and I can continue working as nothing went wrong. I can also make it so that I can make it so it'll protect 2 drives from failing instead of just one. So if I go into settings here, you can see this dual disk redundancy, and it says protect this Drobo against up to 2 simultaneous drive failures. I don't do that because I don't know what the odds are of 2 hard drives failing at the same time, and if I do that, I lose a significant amount of hard drive space. It needs almost twice as much space to protect itself, so it's not worth it to me. Sylvia, no, once you convert your camera to infrared, it's done. That's it. It's pretty much a permanent process. So it will not act as a normal camera. So that's kind of the caveat to it. Who do I send it to again? I sent it to Digital Silver Imaging. DigitalSilverImaging.com. Good guys. The owner is a nice guy. Eric, he's a great guy. And like I said, I want to say it was like $250. Oh no, $280. So $290 plus shipping. So you're looking at something like three and change. Not a cheap thing. Yeah, that's for your regular. If you have a full frame, it's more because the filter is larger. So if you were converting a 5D Mark II, it would cost a little bit more. But it gives you some pretty beautiful results. I've been really enjoying my time with infrared. So, Jill, the texture brush needs to be put in a specific folder. So, if on the Mac, if you go to your, I think the instructions are on the website, but if you go to your library, app support, Adobe Lightroom, and then where is it? Local adjustment presets. Yeah, it's under the local adjustment presets folder. You just drop this Lightroom template. You have to restart Lightroom. Quit Lightroom and restart it, and it'll pick it up. You'll see it in the dropdown. So that's kind of. Ted's asking, how do I see real-time color adjustments made in Lightroom 3 as my lab will print them? You just have to load the ICC profile. You can load their display profiles here under color. You can see I have my custom profile. You can also load for printer profiles. So that's basically how printing works, or how using custom profiles work. When you apply the profile, it should adjust your display. So you process according to that. Can a Drobo be used as a backup destination? Absolutely. I could have just used this as a backup hard drive and worked off of one of these guys. But the reason why I use Drobo as my production volume is because it has that built-in drive failure protection. Also, it lets me build an absolutely massive hard drive. Like right now, this can go up to a 15 terabyte hard drive. I can keep adding hard drives until it reaches 15 terabytes, which will be insane. Which would probably be more realistic if I did video. So, with that, we've gone almost an hour and 40 minutes, which is awesome. And yeah, I will post this entire webinar onto the website. It'll be a long one, but it'll be good. And Les is onOne developing any new products to improve your workflow. I can't really comment on what is coming out. Rest assured that we have some pretty awesome stuff coming out. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but we are doing some very cool things, and I'm sure everyone will be interested. Steve, you're asking, you see on my blog that I'm a big fan of tilt shift. Yeah, I have 3 tilt shift lenses. And what about focal point? Check out our university archive. I did a webinar that specifically compares tilt shift lenses and focal point. So it should pretty much address exactly what you're asking. It's online right now. Rock on, John, in the UK. 10:40 p.m. over there. You're a trooper for being up with me right now. I appreciate it. I love that people are hanging out this late at night, just rapping about cameras. This is why it's such a fantastic industry. It's just the community. It's all about the community, and it's just a bunch of fun people who are really just into this art, this craft. And if I can help with what I've learned over the years, help you guys, then that's awesome. That's just the way it works. So, Jill, go to the supermarket. I actually have to go to the supermarket too. I have to get some food. With that, let me close it up, because we can really just ruin people's Wednesdays with a lack of sleep.